March 1941. The British focus in the Mediterranean has swung suddenly, almost jarringly, towards the Balkans, with the anticipated German invasion of Greece soon to begin. British and Commonwealth troops are stripped away from some positions in North Africa at the tail end of their highly successful foray into Italian Libya and set sail for Athens. The Italian Navy, bent but not broken from the British raid at Taranto, sensed an opportunity to go back on the offensive by attacking and destroying these convoys in transit, throwing the British strategy in the Balkans into disarray. The British know something big is coming, but with the Mediterranean fleet stretched supporting operations from Malta to Athens, is there anything that they can do to stop it? The British victory at Taranto in November 1940 appeared to have fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Mediterranean. With 3 Italian battleships out of action and the Italian Navy, the Regia Marina, temporarily on the defensive, the Royal Navy enjoyed a brief period of operational freedom, but that advantage would prove short-lived. Alarmed by the vulnerability of its ally, Germany moved to quickly reinforce the theatre. Almost immediately after Taranto, the Luftwaffe dispatched Fliegerkorps to Sicily under the command of Albert Kesselring. By January 1941, the veteran Air Corps is fully operational, bringing with it torpedo aircraft, dive bombers, and long-range fighters. The impact is immediate. On January 10th, German aircraft catch the carrier HMS Illustrious operating between Sicily and Tunisia. In a series of coordinated attacks, Junkers Ju-87 dive bombers score multiple hits, penetrating the carrier's hangar deck and detonating among her aircraft, killing more than 100 crewmen and wrecking much of her air group. Illustrious, the ship from which the Taranto raid was launched, survives and limps to Malta, but is out of action for the foreseeable future. The attack demonstrated that the Mediterranean fleet could no longer operate with impunity. British carrier fighters proved inadequate against determined Luftwaffe attacks, and British Admiral Andrew Cunningham was forced to acknowledge that he was not going to get total freedom to operate, whether the Italian fleet was weakened or not. This throws the security of the central Mediterranean, especially Malta, back into doubt. A German air support gives the Regia Marina greater confidence to sortie beyond the protection of its own coastline and challenge British movements across the eastern Mediterranean. While the Royal Navy retain important advantages in radar and intel gathering, the brief period of undisputed British dominance after Taranto has come to an end. Despite the growing Axis air threat, Britain remains committed to supporting Greece. Throughout March 1941, the Royal Navy, supplemented by Commonwealth ships, escort a steady flow of troops, equipment and supplies across the eastern Mediterranean from Egypt to Greece and Crete. These convoys form part of a wider Allied effort to strengthen the Balkans against expected German intervention, which seems ever more likely as Italy continues to flounder. Italian High Command are well aware of these movements and begin to see an opportunity. They prepare a major sortie into the eastern Mediterranean with the aim of intercepting British shipping and disrupting the reinforcement effort. The operation should offer a good chance to strike a significant blow against Allied strategy in the region and push the Royal Navy back on the defensive. A swift, determined force may very well achieve its objectives and be gone before the British can react. Plans are drawn up and orders are issued. However, as it transpires, the British are listening. At Bletchley Park, cryptanalysts working under Alfred Dilley Knox achieve increasing success against Italian naval signals. In the days before the operation, a series of decrypts reveal that a major fleet movement is imminent, with subsequent messages revealing the composition of the force and its intended target. Armed with this intelligence, Admiral Andrew Cunningham prepares to meet the Italians at sea, hopefully decisively, and catch them without significant air support. Speed and discretion are of the essence. If he's too slow, the Italians may complete their raid and depart by the time his battleships arrive. If the Axis know he's coming, they may very well not show up, or worse, he may find German air power waiting for him. One British account tells the story in detail, describing the steps Cunningham took to conceal the source of his information. According to this version, he made a conspicuous appearance at a golf club near Alexandria carrying an overnight bag, creating the impression that he intended to spend the weekend ashore and playing a few rounds of golf well within the view of a Japanese diplomat, fully expecting him to report the activity to his Italian and German counterparts. That evening, the story goes, Cunningham smuggles himself out of the golf club under the cover of darkness, boards his flagship HMS Warspite, and departs Alexandria with his battle fleet. Rather than searching blindly across the Mediterranean, he was steaming directly at the sector that British intelligence had pointed him towards with all haste. Admiral Angelo Iachino's Italian force is built around the modern battleship Vittorio Veneto, supported by 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a screen of destroyers. Fast and heavily armed, it represents one of the strongest surface forces the Regia Marina has yet committed to battle. Opposing it from Cunningham's Mediterranean fleet, the main striking force consisting of the battleships Warspite, Valiant, and Burham, supported by the aircraft carrier Formidable and numerous destroyers. Operating ahead of the battle fleet is Vice Admiral Henry Pridham Whipple's cruiser squadron, known as VALF, composed of the light cruisers Ajax, Gloucester, Orion, and Perth, with accompanying destroyers. Cunningham's force sails from Egypt the evening of the 27th, aiming to meet up with VALF on the 28th, which itself has sailed out of the port of Piraeus in Athens. During the early hours of March 28th, both sides begin searching for one another. Formidable launches reconnaissance aircraft shortly before dawn, while Italian aircraft also scour the sea lanes south of Crete. Before long, reports begin arriving on both flagships that enemy forces have been sighted. Shortly after sunrise, Pridham Whipple's cruiser force makes contact with the leading Italian formations. At first, the British find themselves facing Italian cruisers, but the situation soon evolves as Vittorio Veneto joins the action, comfortably outranging the British cruisers with her mighty 15-inch main guns. Pridham Whipple's cruiser force soon realizes it is dangerously outmatched and chooses to disengage towards the south. The retreat is deliberate, leading Iachino's force towards Cunningham's approaching battle fleet and into range of the aircraft aboard Formidable. The Italian fleet presses on, determined to engage the British cruisers, but Cunningham's main force is just about to join the action. At 09:38, the carrier Formidable launches Fairey Albacore torpedo bombers against the Italian fleet. The attack does not achieve any significant material damage, but it nevertheless has an important effect, causing the Italian ships to take evasive action to avoid the air-launched torpedoes. Already losing ground on the retreating cruisers, it soon becomes apparent that every minute of pursuit places Vittorio Veneto at an even more vulnerable position. Each nautical mile sailed brings her closer to the carrier Formidable and further away from its own support. By midday, Iachino breaks off the chase and begins withdrawing to the protection of Axis air cover. For Cunningham, however, the battle is just getting started. Throughout the afternoon, British aircraft continue to shadow the retreating Italians while the battleships press on in pursuit. The hope here is to use air power to fix the faster Italian ships, forcing them to slow via damage or evasive maneuvers, and allow the slower British battleships time to catch up and engage in a decisive battle. Shortly after 1500, Formidable launches another torpedo strike, and this time the British achieve the breakthrough they need. Flying through intense anti-aircraft fire, Lieutenant Commander John Daniel Stead scores a torpedo hit against Vittorio Veneto. The hit causes extensive flooding and temporarily brings the Italian flagship to a halt as the crew wrestles with the damage. Damage control parties quickly contain the worst of it, and within a short time Vittorio Veneto is moving again, albeit at speeds of 14 to 19 knots, radically reduced from 30-knot max speed. Daniel Stead and the rest of the plane's crew do not survive the attack, their aircraft being shot down as they withdraw. Yet their sacrifice achieves Cunningham's objectives. For the first time that day, the Italians can no longer rely on speed alone to escape. With darkness approaching, Admiral Iachino is now focused on getting his force safely home. The damaged Vittorio Veneto is still making way, but at a reduced speed, and British aircraft continue to shadow the retreating fleet. To provide maximum protection against further air attack, the Italian ships regroup into a compact formation, with Vittorio Veneto at her center and the escorts arranged around her in multiple columns, screening her from torpedo attacks and maximizing overlap between the various ships' anti-aircraft guns. A short while after 1930, this formation change seems to pay off, as British bombers are sighted once more, and the scene descends into a storm of anti-aircraft fire, smoke, and searchlights. Amid the confusion, Sub-Lieutenant F.M. Williams in Albacore 5A drops his torpedo just before 1946, which ultimately strikes a heavy cruiser Polar, leaving her without power and dead in the water as the darkness fully sets in. The immediate danger has passed, and Vittorio Veneto has been spared. The exact results of the strike are not immediately clear to the British, though. One pilot shadowing the Italian fleet in the last of the daylight even erroneously radios the news that an Italian battleship is mobilized, when he was almost definitely looking at the crippled cruiser Polar. As a result, Cunningham still had reason to believe that sinking Vittorio Veneto herself may still be on the table. The Italians, meanwhile, face a difficult decision. The main body of the fleet has continued its withdrawal towards the safety of Italian air cover, but abandoning a modern heavy cruiser is not ideal. Fortunately for them, with night setting in, they should have a perfect opportunity to recover Pola in the hours of darkness with minimal risk. The heavy cruisers Zara and Fiume are ordered to turn back, but to not do so until about an hour after receiving the order. Accompanying them are the destroyers Vittorio Alfieri, Josue Carducci, Vincenzo Gioberti, and Alfredo Oriani. Their mission: locate Pola, assess the damage, and get her moving or tow her back to safety if possible. They manage to rendezvous with Pola and begin their work. At 22:20, Italian crews are still hard at work trying to get Pola moving, and briefly pause to note the arrival of a few additional ships to the east-northeast. The sighting is met with a bit of surprise, unaware that more support was on the way. Their work continues, but not for very long. In fact, the fate of most of these Italian sailors at this moment is already sealed. These new arrivals are not Italian vessels, but the British battleships Valiant, Burham, and Cunningham's flagship, the Warspite. Unbeknownst to the Italians, the British main battle fleet had not backed off as night fell, as they expected, but instead have pushed on through the darkness, guided by radar, determined to catch their prey. Now they have, and Cunningham himself stands at a range of barely 3,800 yards from the unprepared Italians, almost point-blank for radar-assisted battleship guns. He gives the order to attack. British searchlights suddenly blaze to life and illuminate the Italian formation. Mere seconds later, they open fire. Heavy shells crash into the Italian cruisers at close range, tearing straight through armor, crew compartments, and magazines alike. Witnesses will later describe entire turrets being blown into the air as salvo after salvo struck home. The Italian ships have virtually no opportunity to respond. Within seconds, Fiume is completely ablaze from bow to stern, and sinks within minutes. Zara is also all but lost, but stays afloat. Caught in the crossfires, the destroyers fare little better. Vittorio Alfieri and Josue Carducci are shattered and sink during the opening phase of the engagement, while the remaining destroyers escape only by laying smoke and fleeing into the darkness. The entire action lasts only a few minutes, with the British battleships moving off at 22:31, leaving the smaller escorting destroyers to comb the wreckage for survivors and finish off the disabled Italian ships. The British consider towing Pola back to Egypt as a prize, but with daylight approaching and the threat of Axis air attack increasing, the British put Zara and Pola beneath the waves with torpedoes and begin sailing back to base. A message is sent through to the Italians, informing them that they've now stopped rescuing survivors and suggesting that the Italians begin their own rescue operations. The Battle of Cape Matapan would ultimately go down as one of the most crushing defeats in Italian naval history, and arguably Cunningham's greatest moment as an admiral. Italian losses were severe. The heavy cruisers Zara, Fiume, and Pola were all sunk, eliminating the entire 1st Cruiser Division. The destroyers Vittorio Alfieri and Josue Carducci were also lost, while the battleship Vittorio Veneto suffered significant damage from a British torpedo strike but managed to escape. The human cost was equally devastating. More than 2,000 Italian sailors killed, including Admiral Carlo Cataneo, commander of the 1st Cruiser Division. Over 1,000 additional survivors were captured by British ships or later recovered by Italian rescue vessels. British casualties were confined entirely to the fleet air arm, with a handful of planes lost and damaged mainly through accidents throughout the course of the battle. The only fatalities directly from enemy fire were Lieutenant Commander John Daniel Stead, whose torpedo attack had helped cripple Vittorio Veneto, and the plane's other 2 crewmen, Lieutenant Robert Cook and Petty Officer Airman George Blencorn. Cunningham, through his use of signals intelligence and naval aviation in sync with his battleships, managed to score a great victory at Cape Matapan. In terms of material losses, the destruction of the 1st Division was hardly the end of the Regia Marina, but the psychological effect was clear and pronounced. A direct clash with Cunningham's fleet on the open sea, especially in the hours of night, especially without direct support from Axis air power, was to court disaster. This is something Admiral Iachino will later write himself. For the British, another victory, another vindication of Cunningham's reverence for naval aviation, and another opportunity to press the advantage. But the Mediterranean is far from secure, especially the closer the British draw to Italy, in range of those airfields and Kesselring's bombers. Axis convoys still make the journey from Italy to Libya under the blanket of German air cover with regular success. A fact that the British will soon be bemoaning, as the Axis counterattack in Libya, spearheaded by Erwin Rommel's troops, begins to gather ahead of steam. As I mentioned previously on our Taranto video, we actually have a whole mini-series covering that campaign in North Africa on our World War II channel, so if you haven't seen it yet, go and check that out. You will find the links to that playlist in the video description. Please do remember to subscribe to Time Goes Cartographic as we push on to capture more and more battles through the magnificent medium of many maps in motion. Yes, I did write that on my script. Okay, for today though, it's goodbye from all of us at TGC. All the best.